Well, good afternoon, YouTube. This is Chuck. It's Tuesday, May 30th, and as you can tell, I'm coming to you from the man cave. It's kind of windy outside today, so it's probably not a good day to try to shoot anything outside. And I'm still kind of laid up. I still got my little catheter friend laying on the floor next to me. But this morning, I put up on my community page, I put up a picture of this little sign here that was on my toolbox. It came off my Goldwing to commemorate an iron butt ride that I did 32 years ago today. And said that maybe I'd make a video about it because the story's a little bit too long to try to talk about in a couple paragraphs on the community page. So I figured I'd come back with you today and I'd kind of tell you that story and how that all came to be. Well, I've gone on a 3-week ride. I had a bunch of vacation time I had to burn, and my job, I was a fire chief, and it was a high-pressure job, but I'd been there a long time, and I got quite a bit of vacation. And the problem with it is, if you didn't use it, you lost it. And so I really couldn't, because of my job, I really couldn't be gone. I had too much stuff to do, and but the problem with that, of course, is I don't want to lose that vacation either. So I was between marriages at the time, so I was a single guy, and so I had a 1988, brought a brand new 1988 Honda GL 1500 Goldwing, when that was the year they first came out with the GL 1500, the 6-cylinder. And so I would just take off and go burn vacation time. Well, in May of 1991, I decided I'd do that. And so I took off, and I was gone for 3 weeks. And I went back across into southern Arkansas and across over into Mississippi, and got on the Natchez Trace Parkway and rode the Natchez Trace Parkway through Alabama and on up into Tennessee. Then I went on up to Richmond, Kentucky, and I went to a Rider Magazine rally, which Rider Magazine was a big motorcycle magazine at the time. And after that rally was over with, then I rode on over into through West Virginia and on up into Maryland. And I ended up on Memorial Day weekend, or Memorial Day Monday, I ended up in Washington, D.C. And at that time, Pennsylvania Avenue was still open in front of the White House. And I got there early afternoon, and it was stinking hot and high humidity. And they were just setting up for the annual music showing concert in front of the Capitol, and so a bunch of streets were blocked off. And I wanted to go see the Vietnam War Memorial, but I'll be danged, I couldn't find a parking place anywhere. And I went around the quadrangle a couple times looking for a parking place, and I couldn't find one. And it was hot, and I was getting a little frustrated. And I knew that I didn't want to stay in Washington, D.C. overnight, because it's not necessarily a very nice place, especially for out-of-towners. And so I ended up not stopping. I could see the War Memorial but I wasn't able to stop and get off the bike and walk over to it. That was how close I got to all that stuff. And so I ended up riding east a little bit over to Annapolis, Maryland, got into a motel there for the night. Well, the next day after that, I rode down, crossed over into the Delmarva Peninsula, and down across the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel down to Norfolk, Virginia. And that's a ride in itself, 21 miles, bridges and tunnels across the opening of Chesapeake Bay. It's quite the deal. And then from there, I rode back inland, went through Richmond, Virginia, and ended up in Front Royal, Virginia. And Front Royal, Virginia is the north end of the Skyline Drive, which is Shenandoah National Park. So I got up early next morning and I rode Skyline, the first 101 miles, Skyline Drive, then it turns into the Blue Ridge Parkway, and rode that all the way down through Virginia into North Carolina over the next couple of days. And so I ended up coming out at the south end, which is near Cherokee, North Carolina, and immediately jumped on into the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, went over the mountain, down into Pigeon Forge. And anyway, come to the end of the day, I got caught in rush hour traffic in Knoxville, Tennessee. And it was miserable. It was hot, it was humid. Between the heat coming off of the vehicles on both sides of me and the heat coming off the pavement, it was probably 130 degrees sitting there waiting for traffic to move. And So I finally got loose from that, and so I rode another 100 miles or so further west and to a little town called Cookeville, Tennessee. Well, I gave myself 4 days to get home, and I figured that that'd be plenty of time. Wouldn't have to push it too hard, and I had to be back to work. And so I got a motel in Cookeville, Tennessee. Well, they put me clear down at the end in a ground floor room, and I was down there by the trash dumpsters. And well, wouldn't you know it, that morning, the damn garbage truck came and emptied the trash dumpsters at 4 o'clock in the morning. And so all the banging and clanging and the diesel motor and all that kind of stuff, of course, woke me up. And I knew I didn't want to get caught in the rush hour traffic in Nashville because I know that's legendary. And so I thought, well, maybe I'm awake now. I might as well hit the road and get some miles behind me, and I'll get past Nashville before rush hour. So I did that. It was still dark. I'm out on the freeway on I-40 westbound. The speed limit in those days was 65 miles an hour, but of course nobody drove that. So I set my cruise control on my bike at about 72. Well, make a long story short, everything lined just right that day, and I ended up seeing Nashville, Memphis, Little Rock, Oklahoma City, and Amarillo in daylight on the same day. I never went over 72 miles an hour. I had a sit-down breakfast, a sit-down lunch, and a sit-down dinner. And I checked into the motel in Amarillo 1,017 miles later, after the sun had gone down, but before it was dark. Still dusk. And it's a motel I stayed at before, so I kind of knew where I was going. But that turned out to be my iron butt day. And there's a couple of reasons why I did that. Number one is it was an overcast day, so the sun was not beating down on you and just baking you like it can be, of course, on a motorcycle on a hot day. The second thing was it wasn't windy. But probably the most important thing is that that's during storm season, and there was a break in the storms that day because they've been having thunderstorms and tornadoes and all that kind of stuff through that tornado belt there in West Texas and in Oklahoma, but it took a day off that day, so the weather was nice. So I just kept pushing on, and I ended up checking into the motel at about 9 o'clock at night. It was still a little bit light out, and I'd ridden 1,017 days, which qualifies as an iron butt day for those of you that spent much time traveling on a motorcycle. You all know what that is. So tell you how much it wore me out. I actually got up the next morning. And I knew that everything from the west of there was familiar territory because I've been there before. And so I ended up riding 640 miles home. So I gave myself 4 days to get home. I rode home in 2 days, had 2 days to recuperate at home before I had to go back to work. So now the other thing I mentioned on there is that the name Cookeville is misspelled on that little plaque. Well, that turned out to be kind of an inside joke because a friend of mine had kind of a side hustle going where he was making trophies and plaques and all that kind of stuff. He had the little engraver machine. And so I had him make the plaque to put on the bike to commemorate that iron butt day that I rode. And he, somewhere along the line, misspelled Cookeville. Well, I immediately saw it. I immediately pointed out to him, and he apologized all over the place. And he said that he was sorry and he'd make me a new one and all that kind of stuff. I said, no, I don't want that. I said, I'd like this one. I want to be able to have something I can give you a hard time about every time I see you. So that misspelling on that kind of became an inside joke between the two of us for several years after that. And so anyway, that's kind of my story about my iron butt day. I did several 750-mile days after that, but I never attempted a 1,000-mile day after that one time. So I think for that, I'll let you go for this one. It's kind of gone on. It's an interesting story, at least I think so. I hope you find it interesting. If you notice, the swelling on my face has gone down quite a bit. I'm feeling a little bit better. And as I said, this is Tuesday. Thursday, I got to go back down to the cancer clinic, and they'll take this catheter out, and hopefully I'll be much better on the road to recovery. But I'm gradually purging all the toxins out of my body, and I'm feeling better. So that's my story for this time. As I always tell you, take care of each other, love each other. It's a great day, and we'll get back to you again on another one real soon. So right now, I'll just say peace out.